Hello there and welcome to our third and final video on normalisation. We're looking at getting our tables from second normal form to third normal form. So here on our screen we can see that we have our three tables, our certificates, courses and members table in second normal form because there are no longer any partial dependencies. We got rid of them. So make sure you've watched the last video if you don't know how that was done, because otherwise this video won't make any sense. So in order for us to be in third normal form, the data must have no non-key dependencies, also known as transitive dependencies. It must also be in second normal form. And you've already been introduced to the idea of dependencies, so now you're looking for any data that depends on fields that are not designated a primary key or part of a primary key. So before, in this table, we were looking to see if this column, for example, was dependent partially on this or partially dependent on this. Turns out this one was wholly dependent. It needed this column and this column. What we're looking for in third normal form is if this column here is dependent on any of the non-key columns. Is it dependent on this? Any of these? Is it dependent on any of these? Is it dependent on any of these? That's what we're looking for now. So before we were looking at key field dependencies, now we're looking for non-key field dependencies. So basically looking at these white columns here in all of our tables. So in this example we have to consider all three of our tables for non-key dependencies. So first let's take a look at the members table. So in the members table it's already in second normal form. It turns out that this table is already in third normal form, as all the fields are fully dependent on the primary key member ID. The first name, the last name and phone all relate uniquely to the member ID primary key. So depending on who the member ID is, depends on the name of the person, the last name and the phone. And these tables are pretty straightforward because they only contain a primary key and everything relates to that. The fastest way to spot really if something has a non-key dependency is to look at it logically and to apply common sense. In my members table, is there any way I could split that down any further? Not really. I've got the first name, last name and the phone number of a person, and that's it. So it's already in third normal form. Now let's take a look at the course table. It's already in second normal form again. It is already in third normal form because again all the fields are fully dependent on the primary key course code. So they all relate one way or another. The description of the course and the fee of the course requires the course code. Next up we have our certificate table. And oh dear, what do we have here? The trick here, in my opinion, is could you infer any more tables from the data? And like I said a minute ago, apply common sense. Is anything still dependent when it isn't a primary or foreign key? Well, yeah. See if you can spot it. We have one non-key dependency here, and that is the instructions. And that is the instructor's first name, last name and instructor's email. These three here, are they dependent? You could say that the first name and the last name are dependent on the instructor's email. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the email looks unique, right? Well, all of those are unique. People would only have one email. You can't have another a duplicate email realistically. You can have people with the same name, which is why I didn't use the names, or even combining the names. We could have a first name and a surname that are the same, that match. So for example, Sue James always has the email sue.james@example.org. So to fix this, I would create a new instructors table. And we need a primary key for it. So we could use the email as a primary key. Okay? And most people would happily just go in and create an instructor's email as the primary key because it looks unique, right? But it's important here to ask yourself the question, is it possible for two records in the database to have the same value in that field? Now you might say, no, yeah, I get you just said before, unique emails, they are unique to the person. You can't have two of the same, okay? But I would be tempted not to use it still. That's just because it's good practice to create something like an instructor ID. So I might have an instructor ID field, and then I might have the first name, last name, and instructor email. So I might have a couple more columns in there, and this would be my primary key. And then inside my certificates table, no longer would you need all of this information. You would just need the instructor's ID in one of these columns as a foreign key. So let's have a look at that then. Here is my new instructor table. Here's my new instructor table with my instructor ID primary key involved. I've got my course code primary key involved. I've got my members primary key involved. And in here, member ID now is a foreign key as it was before. Course code is a foreign key as it was before. Assessment date is wholly dependent again on member ID and course code, so it has to stay there. And the instructor ID, that now is another foreign key. So these four tables have been created. You can see now that the data redundancy, the duplication of data, has been limited. It's been reduced as much as possible, and it looks more organized. Visually, it looks more organized. And because we have no non-key dependencies, also known as transitive dependencies, we are now in third normal form. And that is the extent we need to go to in the A-level. So just to recap for you, first normal form, eliminate duplicate columns. Get rid of any groups of repeating data, so one item per field. Identify the primary key and separate out any attributes which are not atomic into separate attributes. Second normal form, check that the data is already in first normal form. Remove any partial dependencies that you can. And they are, remember, partial dependencies are dependent upon the key values. So that's a primary key. And then fix any many-to-many relationships that you discover. And if you don't know what that means, go back to the entity relationship diagram and have a look, because we might have to create a linking table. In third normal form, check the data is already in second normal form, and then check that there are no non-key dependencies. So that's attributes or columns of data that are dependent on other columns that have no foreign key or primary key attachment. And that is our first, second and third normal form videos all completed. In the next video, we're going to look at structured query language, and that's the language we use to interrogate our database for meaningful information. And I hope to see you on the next one.